Agenda item 1, consideration of a new petition. The first item of business is consideration of a new petition. The committee agreed to invite Accountability Scotland to speak to the petition. The petition is PE1538 by Dr Richard Burton on behalf of Accountability Scotland and Transparency in SPSO investigations. Members have a note by the clerk, the slice briefing the petition, and Dr Burton's provided extra briefing which is in our additional papers. Can I welcome Peter Stewart-Blacker, who's the Chairman for Accountability Scotland, to the meeting. You're very welcome. If I can invite you to address the committee for a maximum of 5 minutes, after which I will ask some questions and then invite my committee colleagues to ask further questions.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've got the hardest job, I think, here. I've got to try and make the equivalent of a train timetable exciting to you, so apologies for this. Administrative justice is the foundation of social justice. Without that, we will not have a fair society. It is important that the government machine is held to account effectively. The Ombudsman is effectively the public voice to Parliament. A complainant needs the facts of a full complaint to be so that he can understand how to effectively make that complaint. Some of our members have had this, the investigations, they haven't been given the full facts of the case. The correspondence between the Ombudsman and the bodies under jurisdiction have been kept secret in line with the Ombudsman's Act. The problem with the definition of secret is that it seems to be applied in many ways. And the Ombudsman has got a very tight grip on this. We need the definition to be properly defined, and we therefore are looking for a change in the Act to give us that definition more accurately. Sorry, I'm just... The Ombudsman has precluded many of our complainants. They've been trying to get the correspondence so that they can rebut the arguments that are put by the bodies under jurisdiction. Without knowing what the other side is saying, it's not like we don't have the advantages of a court of law where you have both sides of an argument put. We don't have that. It is possible to redefine or to properly define private. The Welsh manage it by getting the complainants where there are information that is sensitive and needs to be kept away from the public. They ask them to sign a non-disclosure document. That way that the people who are involved in the complainants can actually defend themselves properly and see the facts that are put beside them. We need a wholly transparent system, which we don't have. What we are looking for is all the evidence to be available to both sides so that when a decision is made by the Ombudsman, they can understand the facts and time is taken to explain to the complainants when they haven't been found for. We need understanding. Without the understanding, it causes people huge amounts of stress. We have members who are stressed and have great difficulty in doing this sort of thing because we're not felt that we are not heard and we are not given effective administrative justice. The Ombudsman has been in power since 2002. Nobody has independently investigated any of the cases for their effectiveness and quality of the justice that he delivers or doesn't. And this is, we need real justice so that we can have deliver social justice to the people of Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your evidence. I've got two questions for you. The first one was, what would the effect be if your petition was accepted in full by the Scottish Government?
It would allow the justice to be delivered, and it would allow the complainants to have that satisfaction. The Gibraltarese Ombudsman has a success rate or a satisfaction rate, which we don't know what the Ombudsman's recent success rates are, but they are in the low 50s. The Gibraltarese Ombudsman achieves a satisfaction rate in excess of 95% by the way that he investigates it. It is done in private, but they are given both sides of the argument. So that way there is the Gibraltarese Ombudsman only finds for 25% of his complainants, but yet has a 95% satisfaction rate, and that's what we're looking for, is to deliver effective justice.
Thank you for that. And my final question is, what evidence do you have that change is required?
We have 100 members who all agree with the statement that the Ombudsman fails to adequately and effectively investigate. And that is, they don't have, there's no easy recourse to justice. The only recourse they have is to the judicial review. And none of our members, and they don't get legal aid, and they don't get any recourse. So effectively, that avenue is blocked. So there's no effective remedy.
Do you have any evidence out with your membership?
It's very difficult because we are, rather like the train timetable, not a very popular thing. The press aren't desperately interested in this. So we find each other, and it is extremely difficult to find evidence out with that because we are a small membership of 100 people, but it is still 100 people who have sought us out.
Thank you for that. Chip Brodie.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I wonder if I have some sympathy with anything that's free, open and transparent, which has been evident from any previous petitions. I just wonder, though, that in terms of who you're asking for, in terms of the openness, you're also asking for to be made aware of the content of any verbal communications.
Yes.
That's an extremely difficult thing to do, isn't it?
It may be difficult, but I don't see why the notes of a conversation, which you would have thought if there was an operation that was like the Ombudsman, that I presume will record telephone conversation, and some sort of précis of that would be relatively easily achieved with modern technology.
I think people put different interpretations on the stress of particular words, and indeed the interpretation of particular words. I wonder if I can talk about process now. This has been, the SPSO Act was developed in 2002. Has there been any review of the process at all in the last 12 years?
Not independently, no.
So there's been no need, in your opinion, or is there a need for you?
I think there is considerable need for, excuse me, there's considerable need for review. An organisation like the SPSO cannot go without some form of check or balance or review. The Ombudsman it is very easy for him to say that everything is all right in the garden, but unless somebody goes in and it inspects whether the weeds are growing or not, we need that reassurance. He has gained more and more importance within the Scottish Government machine, and I understand he's being given more responsibility. We just need that confidence and reassurance that things are are being dealt with properly, and we have a membership that says that that is not the case.
I just wonder, you just said SPSO is becoming increasingly important within the Scottish Government machine. And yet, in our briefing, it says, in the exercise of SPSO's statutory functions, the SPSO is not subject to the direction or control of any member of the Scottish Government, or indeed the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body. Who does it report to?
Well, this is the problem. He reports to nobody. He is entirely independent. But without some form of review, there is nobody there in place to review him.
And there's,
so
there's no audit of any...
There's audit for financial and effectiveness, but it is not actually looking at the operations. And one of my overused analogies is the SPSO is a beans factory. It has a wonderful machine that can take the beans in, it can cook them, it can can them, it can put it. But at the other end of it, there is no quality control. Nobody tastes the beans. And that's what we feel this is necessary, is some form of check and balance to know that we're actually he is doing the job.
Right, just talking about, if I may, sorry to interrupt, talking about checks and balances. I mean, you're asking for free, independent, impartial, and open review of complaints. How do you think most complainants would feel if the guarantee of confidentiality was removed and that there might be some issues within a complaint that are not desirable or required to be made public?
I don't think the removal of confidentiality is actually is necessary here. You can keep it in place. The Welsh one, they sign a non-disclosure agreement, so it doesn't need to be put in the public domain. And if it was part of the situation where they were in breach of a confidentiality agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, then it wouldn't be put into the public domain. But it would allow a proper investigation to be carried out, because the complainant would have the same access to the facts as the Ombudsman and does the body under jurisdiction. So there is a transparent process.
But in the development of fairness, I can understand that and appreciate it and agree with it. Isn't it possible the SPSO could argue, for their frame of reference, that they wish their deliberations or information to be confidential?
For what reason? This is what we don't understand, and we don't understand why there is any need for most of these things.
No, I didn't say there's a reason. Isn't it possible that's what they would argue?
I'm sure they will, but we don't understand it. If the Ombudsman is meant to be impartial and fair and all the other things, and therefore transparent, we don't understand why he can't be open with us.
Let me, if I may, give you just a couple of questions on the efficacy of the SPSO. The complainant, it says the complainant will be contacted within 2 weeks by the complaints reviewer who's dealing with the case. Does that happen?
I'm sure it does happen, but this again is it's going back to the beans factory. It moves from one department to the other seamlessly. But unless the quality of the work that is actually being done by these reviewers, then you can have the most brilliant process in the world, but without review, and without inclusion of something like ISO 9001, where there is external reviewers looking at not only the process by which it goes through, but actually the effectiveness of the decisions that are made by that.
I understand.
And ISO 9001 has been started to be introduced into some of the government departments, which is something that we would welcome.
And just on that, in terms of, we talked about response within 2 weeks, there's also the advice we've been given that they normally provide an update for the complainant in writing and will decide within a 10-week period, although it can be much shorter than that. Now, the reason I'm asking about the efficiency is, what goes along with that is the quality of the people who are handling the complaints. How many people are involved with the SPSO? Is it just one, or what's the organisation?
In terms
of the constitution, the number of people who are handling complaints.
From the Ombudsman's point of view?
Yes.
Well, obviously they have a whole process which I'm sure the Ombudsman could answer. I'm not really...
Okay. But in general, they do get back to people within 10 weeks with a decision, do they?
Yes, but you can deliver a can of beans in 3 minutes. If it's inedible, you might as well not have delivered that.
Yes, but you see, the producer might argue that they are edible.
Well, if he doesn't have a quality control department, how can he possibly?
Well, that's the question I was asking about in terms of efficiency and therefore the quality of the reviewers.
The whole concept of, and I suppose, unconscious incompetence comes into this point. If somebody doesn't understand, you don't know what you don't know. So if you've got a reviewer who is completely unconscious of a subject, if they have no idea about a building and they're dealing with a complaint about buildings, then they can produce a fantastic report that misses the point.
Okay, thank you.
You talked about quality control in your analogy of your bean factory, but there is a quality control, as you will know, in the system, in that the Local Government Regeneration Committee take evidence on an annual basis on the quality of the work that's been carried out. I mean, first of all, were you aware of that? And secondly, are you really calling for a change in the legislation, in which case our colleagues on that committee might be better placed to look at that in more detail?
Well, we need initially to get some change and clarification of this, because we need to understand the whole complaint. If you go to a court of law, you hear both the case for the prosecution and the defence. We don't get to see the other side's information. We don't get a chance to rebut that. And that's why we are looking for something to disclose the documents, but we are happy to sign an agreement of non-disclosure, and with the penalties that would do that. So we are looking for a change in the legislation.
And secondly, have you or any of your colleagues attended the gallery when Local Government Regeneration Committee were analysing the performance of the SPSO in its yearly meeting?
Yes. Well, some have watched it on television, but the vast majority watch it on television. Sure.
So in summary, you're looking for either a change in the procedure or a change in legislation to allow you to have access to the documentation?
Yes.
Right. Would it be useful then if we referred this petition to the Local Government Regeneration Committee, which obviously has a responsibility directly in this particular area?
Yes.
Right.
We're very happy to have that.
Because we're always keen to get quality control from petitioners as well, so that's important to know that. Before I go to summation, can I just check whether my other two colleagues wish to ask any further points at this stage. Angus MacDonald?
Yes, thanks, Convener. I was just some short comments. I think it's fair to say that we've had similar incidences highlighted to us at this committee of a lack of accountability of bodies with a perception that there's no proper checks and balances. And it certainly defeats the purpose of the SPSO if it's not wholly transparent, or at least if there is that perception. In the larger scale, perhaps we need to look at whether the monitoring by the Local Government and Regeneration Committee is robust enough. But that's maybe something that they could look at themselves. Just for some clarification, though, you stated that there's been no review of the process. Did you also state that there's been no independent review of any of the cases? Or well,
the process has been reviewed. Jerry White reviewed the actual handling of and wrote a report, and the Ombudsman went south of the border to get somebody who was independent, but he was specifically excluded from looking at casework. So again, we've got somebody who's looking at a process. They have monitored the process, but at the end of the day, it is about the justice that is delivered or not. And that has never been done anywhere in Scotland.
So as far as you're aware, there's no process for looking at, inspecting previous cases?
There's been no independent inquiry into the actual quality of the casework. What we're not asking for is to review the decisions of the Ombudsman. It is purely to look in terms of an examiner of quality of decision, not to change it. Because this has been something that has been led a lot, is that you can't look at the Ombudsman's decisions because he is independent. If you don't set out to change any of his decisions, then you are not interfering in any way in his process. You are merely checking that the man is doing the job that he has been asked to do.
Okay, thank you. Jack Brody, I think you had one final question.
Yes, I had just one final question. In the presentation of the petition, under investigation procedure, if I may quote, Convener, we do in any case know from experience that the SPSO can inadvertently misrepresent details of the accusation, and we also know from experience that the BUJ's, the bodies under jurisdiction, can provide false evidence, presenting second-hand evidence from lower levels in the organisation. Where's your evidence for that?
I would need to ask Dr Burton to answer that, and we could.
I think that's essential because that's a very serious accusation.
I don't think it's meant to. At the end of the day, it is. It is about how we as complainants see it, and it's without the evidence on the other side, and decisions are, or the problem with the Ombudsman, and I can really talk from my own personal experience of the Ombudsman's decisions, is that they are made sometimes without reason. Sometimes it is just written, in my opinion, this. And they're not, it's not weighed in any way. There is no, when there are two competing facts, there is no attempt to say, well, Mr. X said this and Mr. Y said that, and I come out with, I favour Mr. Y's argument. There's never any reason, or very seldom any reason given. There is no weighing of evidence. There is no judgment. It is just, in my opinion, this is X. In my own case, I got the world expert on a computer system versus another accountant. And the Ombudsman just wrote and said, in my opinion, I favour this guy. There was no reason given why he was dismissing the world expert on this particular system. And it's that degree of certainty.
Thank you for that. Unless my colleagues have any other questions, we now, as you may know, come to summation where we've stopped taking questions from yourself, and we now look at next steps. I indicated earlier whether you would favour a referral to local government and regeneration, and you did. So my suggestion to my colleagues are that we refer this petition with all the evidence we've taken to our colleagues in local government, who obviously have a yearly responsibility on this particular area. Are colleagues agreeable to that suggestion?
Can I just say that I have a concern, two concerns. One is I've just asked you a question about serious accusations, and it appears that we don't have sufficient evidence base. But then, of course, that will happen if we have, as we've had with another situation with the JCR, we don't have openness and transparency. I do think that we should write to the local government committee. I also think it's time we had a review of this service, because if we seek openness and transparency and recognise the need for public participation in all aspects of our life, then there should be no hint of closed information, subject, of course, to the individuals involved looking for confidentiality.
Thank you for that. David Torrance.
Happy for it to go to local government.
Thank you. Angus MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just picking up on Chick Brodie's point regarding a review of the service, I think that there's a lot of merit in that. I'm not quite sure how we go about requesting that, or perhaps indicating to the Scottish Government that it might be a good idea. But if we are speaking to the Scottish Government from this committee, I think we should also highlight the petitioner's comment regarding a brief amendment to the Act to the effect that complainants should be allowed to see all exchanges between the SPSO and the bodies complained about, albeit if it is redacted. So I think that should be highlighted to the Scottish Government.
I think that's a good point. It's perfectly competent for us to refer this petition to the Local Government Regeneration Committee, and at the same time write to the Scottish Government with the comments that Angus MacDonald and others, Chick Brodie, have raised. So that's perfectly competent to do if the committee is so minded. Is that agreed?
I think that's the way forward, yeah.
Well, as you have picked up, Mr Stewart, we're very, very keen to make sure that your petition is looked at very seriously. So we're referring to Local Government and Regeneration Committee, and at the same time we are asking Scottish Government for the reviews, and all evidence that we've taken today and in written form will go to our colleagues at Local Government. So you will be kept up to date with developments, and probably the next step will be the clerk for the Local Government Committee will keep you up to date. But could I thank you for coming along and giving evidence to the committee. As you can see, we've taken on board your comments in a very serious fashion, and thanks very much for putting forward the petition. Perhaps you can thank the members of your association as well. So I'll suspend for 2 minutes to allow Mr Peter Stewart-Blacker to leave. Thank you very much.